video on whether or not there's a white genocide occurring in South Africa at the moment, now in 2025, because it's been in the news so much that there's these 50 or so Afrikaaner farmers that have been granted asylum here in the United States. And I got a lot of feedback from people, and some were concerned that I was not as informed as I should be about how bad it actually is. And I sort of landed on the side of saying it's not really a genocide. And what I meant by that is a genocide is the systematic elimination of a race. That's not really happening in South Africa at large. And yet when you apply it to the sector of the population known as the white Afrikaner farmers, I stand corrected. I think that there is a government sanctioned almost situation where the farmers are being targeted. And so rather than me pontificate about this myself, I decided to ask a friend of mine who is living in South Africa. He is an Afrikaner himself. His name is Brahm Hattingh. Brahm and I go way back. He was a pastor when I was in high school. I was in high school in South Africa around about the same time Elon Musk was, and in a similar area. Our high schools were in competition with one another. I was at Willow Ridge High School, and Brahm was one of the religion teachers there, and he was a pastor. And when I got saved in college, he mentored me, and he was involved in Grace to You, the cassette ministry in those days of John MacArthur. And he was the one that taught me a lot of the theology that I know today. We've just stayed in contact over all these years. He's come to visit me here in Mobile, Alabama. And so I asked him to comment from South Africa about what's happening. He has a history, his career history. He was in the intelligence services in South Africa and the military intelligence, and is very well informed as to what's going on in the country politically. So he's the right person to ask these questions of. So I've asked him a handful of questions, and I'm going to have him, in his own words, give those answers. Thanks so much, Brahm, for doing this for me. I really appreciate it, and I hope that it'll be valuable for everybody here.
Hi, Clint. Greetings from the West Coast of South Africa. And thank you for the opportunity to support the comments that you have already made on this subject.
The first question is there racial tension in general in South Africa? And what I mean by that is we think of it as a racially divided country because there's, of the 50 million people, 2 million or so of them are white. Some of those are English white, some of those are Afrikaans white, and then you have the various Bantu tribes as well, Zulu and Xhosa and Sotho and Venda. And is there a lot of racial tension between white and black in general before we talk specifically about the farmers?
We encounter very few racial tensions. Part of the reason is that we live in South Africa under a more effective provincial government. The ANC lost the whole of the Western Cape to the DA, the Democratic Alliance. And the Democratic Alliance are visibly making a difference in providing services to all people. An interesting fact is that the national government under the socialistically inclined ANC government refused to hand over policing to the DA. And the DA believe on their side that they would be much more effective in protecting the people of the province and the country for that matter, if they would be able to take control of the police. So I would say that there are pockets of racial tension depending on where you find yourself in South Africa, but it is clear that the tension is caused by political rhetoric from some desperate politicians. We live in a country where more than 140 laws discriminate against white people in South Africa. Elon Musk wanted to bring Starlink to South Africa, just as one example. This is his summary of the outcome of negotiations, including an in-person meeting with Mr. Ramaphosa not too long ago. Elon Musk says, Starlink is not allowed to operate in South Africa because I am not black. And that is true. In the meantime, Starlink is operational in 20 African countries, including Nigeria, Rwanda, Mozambique, and Kenya, even Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, and Burundi. That just gives us an example of the racial injustices that are happening in South Africa, and those are mostly against white people. I must add again that as we move around and go to the malls and are served by waitresses and waitress at the restaurants, we don't see any of the racial inclinations at all. Again, I say it seems to be from a political motivated point of view.
When we speak of white genocide, is the word genocide an accurate term, or is it just political rhetoric?
To answer this question, we have to refer to the history of the now infamous chant, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." This was a struggle chant or song during the apartheid years and served as motivation for the ANC members and supporters to continue fighting for freedom and democracy. Even during the apartheid years, the words of this chant cannot be seen solely as a metaphor for fighting, politically and socially, I mean. Because even during that struggle, innocent and defenseless people were killed by ANC operatives. Examples are the massacre at the St. James Church in Cape Town on 25 July 1993. 11 people were killed and 58 were wounded during the evening service. The date is significant because at this time almost all negotiations had been finalized for the end of apartheid and the beginning of a new democracy. Nelson Mandela had been released from prison on 11 February 1990 already. Another example is the May 1983 car bomb that killed 19 people, including the bomb planters. The death toll would have been much higher had the explosion happened during rush hour as planned, but the bomb went off prematurely. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee report released in March 2003 says, despite the noble intentions of not killing civilians, the majority of casualties of Mkhonto we Sizwe operations were civilians. So the Mkhonto we Sizwe operations were under the management of the ANC. Mkhonto we Sizwe was the military arm of the ANC. So a total of 71 people died in such attacks between 1976 and 1984. So of these, 52 were civilians and 19 were security force members. So applying violence to meet its goals is nothing new to the ANC. So jump to today. Officially 31 years into the new democracy, and we have an influential political figure, Julius Malema, chanting "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," together with an estimated 80,000 supporters joining in that chant at a meeting at a large sports stadium not too long ago. In 2016, when talking to supporters about the slow pace of land distribution, Mr. Malema warned, "The land will be taken by any means necessary." So this is a lot of background information, but it is important to understand the current context of the white Afrikaner farmer and what is happening in the country, and for those who decided to take up the offer of refugee status in the United States of America.
What exactly is happening to farmers there? Can you give us an example of why this is such a big deal, how they're being targeted, some of the crimes perhaps?
Here's an example, a recent example, March of this year. A 78-year-old farmer was found dead in his bathroom with a cloth in his mouth and bound with wire. He died of multiple cuts to his head. Further evidence of torture includes burn wounds, possibly from boiling water. In 2016, a 9-year-old girl was brutally murdered, gang raped, and beaten to death during a farm attack close to Randfontein, Gauteng. This in 2016. She was one of 4 people in one family that were slaughtered on that day. The father of this girl was last to be killed. He was forced to watch what happened to his whole family before he died. In most cases, very little is stolen. It may be firearms that are licensed for hunting, maybe food, alcohol, and in some cases the vehicle. But in most cases, these attacks stand out from other attacks in South Africa by the level of violence for very little gain. Husband is bound and beaten, then forced to watch how his wife and children are being raped and tortured. Compared to the total number of attacks and murders taking place in South Africa, a 60 to 80 murders and a 400 attacks per year sounds insignificant. But it is when you look at the context and the outspoken intent of the EFF under Julius Malema, together with a silent support by the ANC and the courts, it then becomes a legitimate concern. We must also examine the situation of white farmers in Zimbabwe and what history has taught us. It is the same concept of expropriation without compensation that led to the collapse of farming production in Zimbabwe, and that also led to the violent attacks and removal, often by removing life and limb, in Zimbabwe. So in South Africa, we have seen similar situations occur. Even farms that were expropriated with compensation and handed over to black farmers are failing miserably. An interesting fact is that there are black farmers who are succeeding. In the majority of these cases, the ownership of the land and the management of the farms were initially a joint venture between the white and the black farmer. White farmers helped the black farmers acquire a portion of their land and then helped them become successful at farming their own portion of land. The problem comes in when the government intervenes and targets white farmers and their productive land to do what the ANC government does best: enable corruption and enrich their friends, ultimately leading to bankrupt institutions and poor production. So it's very clear that the farmers are targeted for political gain more than anything else. And the misleading of many desperate farm workers that would want to own their own land, not understanding that it takes hard work and dedication to farm and to make a success at farming.
What did the President Ramaphosa mean when he said that these people are just cowards, these white Afrikaners that want to leave the country, that they're cowards and that they are trying to escape racial justice?
To call South Africans who gives up everything they worked for and move into the unknown, and to call them cowards, means Mr. Ramaphosa does not understand what a coward is. It is easy for him to insult people who are leaving with a very good reason instead of trying to find out what the real reasons for leaving are. You may remember Roland Schoeman from the days that you associated with Willow Ridge High School. Well, Roland Schoeman became an Olympic gold medalist in swimming for South Africa, and exactly the same thing happened to him when he pursued international opportunities at a time when South Africa neglected talented people like Roland. The news he got from government and other influential people was, let him leave. So cowardice, according to dictionaries, indicates a failure of character in the face of challenge. I would say that many of Mr. Ramaphosa's members of parliament qualify under this definition. But it is easy for Mr. Ramaphosa to accuse desperate people with no future while he lives in absolute luxury and under constant guard. He also owns a farm, but his personal bodyguards guarantees that he won't be a victim of a farm attack. It sounds to me that Mr. Ramaphosa wants the white Afrikaners to stay so that he can take property from them legally, referring to the recent law on expropriation without compensation, and he sees that as racial justice.
How do you respond to people who say, well, it's not just the white farmers that are being targeted, there's violence throughout the country, and all race groups are being targeted by the violent crime in South Africa?
Well, we spoke about that a little bit earlier. It is sad, a very sad state of affairs when the argument is that not enough people are dying to pay specific attention to this problem. Crime researchers use murder or homicide rate per 100 as a crude measure of the general level of violence, interpersonal crime globally. According to the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, South Africa's murder rate of 45 per 100,000 that is the statistic for 2023-2024, that is the second highest for countries that publish crime data. So in context then, we look at farmers, and there are 32,000 registered commercial farmers in South Africa, and in 2024 statistics show that 52 farm murders took place, which gives us a much higher ratio per individual measured. The number hides the fact that the level of violence found in these attacks are much more violent than most other attacks that we find in South Africa.
What would your advice be to a white Afrikaans Christian man who has to make a decision for his family whether they will stay or whether they will go? It's a very common thing for South Africans who leave the country to feel a sense of guilt, because it is a beautiful country, and there is a sense that every time somebody who's contributing to society leaves the country, that they are abandoning those, they're making the situation worse with what's called white flight. And so what do you say to a South African who's thinking through whether he should stay or go overseas?
If you are a Christian, then your worldview changes. You have an eternal perspective. This world and its challenges are not the main event. The main event for us is still coming. So, as Christians, we have a responsibility as ambassadors for the King of Kings. And the most important question is not to go or to stay, but what you do, despite your circumstances, to progress the agenda Jesus wants you to pursue. So, as 1 Corinthians 10 verse 31 commands, I'll translate it into the context, whether you stick it out in South Africa or seek asylum in the United States of America, do it to the glory of God. And I would say that those seeking perspective can watch Cage-Free Theology, and you'll be better prepared and equipped to live a God-glorifying life here and or there. So, as you also said, Clint, in one of your broadcasts, if you're a father of a family and you have an opportunity to go and serve the Lord Jesus Christ in another country, and you can keep your family safe and give them a better present and future, then it is something that you may pursue. If you are convinced, on the other hand, to stay in South Africa and that this is where you want to look after your family, provide for them, and be effective as a believer in the country, then stay. But do it for the glory of God.
Thanks, Brahm. Your wisdom is always appreciated.
Thank you very much for the opportunity again, and looking forward to engage with you soon.